is executive search? And perhaps you can talk about how it differs from other forms of senior recruitment as well.
In very simple ways, I would say executive search is the purest form of consulting. You basically help organizations hire the best of people who do wonders in their careers and, to the fortunes of those organizations. So executive search, broadly is the art of finding a needle in a haystack, Patrick. That's the way at least I define it. And, it is where organizations engage and empanel executive search firms like ours, to find them and help them hire senior talent, and there are various ways in which that happens. Executive search, is in the best manner done with a retained mindset, where you engage a retained search firm, which goes about kind of understanding the brief from the client, trying to figure out what do you want, trying to marry the functional skill sets with the behavioral competencies and DNA skill sets, and run a vast search across the industries to help organizations find, best talent, for the job for which they are hiring. There are various ways in which it is done. You could, like I said, engage a retained search firm for this job. There are many contingency search firms, which do that on a success basis. You get a job, you place a person. If you have a successful placement, you end up getting a certain fee. A lot of organizations also do it in an in-house manner, right? So what we as a client will do as a partner will do for a client, they also have their own teams of talent acquisition professionals and consultants who will be doing this job in-house for an organization. So these are the broad ways to do it. In my view, engaging a retained search firm to come and do this job is the cleanest, purest way to find talent, because at the end of the day, what do the organizations need? They need somebody to fill the job, and if somebody can do that in a very, very time-bound, efficient process and helps you find the best talent, that's a job well done. So that in a nutshell is what executive search is. Happy to hear views from others as well.
Thank you. Do others have anything else to add? I like your analogy there of a needle in a haystack, so it's quite apt.
Right. I mean, I think, Jim, that's a great way to put it, the needle in the haystack. And the difference then between a retained approach and a contingency approach is the client then has decided that firm, that consultant will be given the time and the support to sort through all those haystacks to find that needle. Whereas the contingency firm is probably out there trying to find that needle as quickly as possible and may not have the time to assess all of the needles to find the best one indeed. So there's a difference in sort of time constraints on the retained firm versus the contingency firm, where the retained firm is usually given some time to really go through all the haystacks, find the needles, and find the sharpest one available to present to the client.
Absolutely. And in some cases, recruitment firms, contingent recruitment firms might actually just be looking for the hay, because sometimes you don't need the needle, do you? So I guess that's the other point, is executive search firms are doing those critical appointments where there's some sort of strategic element to them. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I call it a difference between I call it a difference between spray and pray and needle in a haystack, right? So a lot of times, like what William was possibly saying, is a lot of times contingency search firms, by nature of the contract, by the fact that you only get paid when a certain job is done, you end up becoming a CV pushing machine. Now no client wants that, right? I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, everybody wants the best fit, and to run a process to find that best fit, and like I said, finding the needle in the haystack is exactly what a job of a specialist is. And I think that's what a retained search firm will possibly be able to do, much more than a contingency search firm or even an in-house process. That's just the way it works.
Yeah. And I think that these days, there's been, quite a lot of involvement, from the executive search industry as well, because these days, client, would like us to help them to not only find the right talent, but also help them to discover and also develop. So, it's already evolving into what we call, the leadership advisory services, so that we can also help the client to assess the talent and also get into some of the strategic, elements. Say, for example, succession planning, is a big part. Executive, assessment is the other part. And also onboarding and team effectiveness. So I think, the sort of whole journey, has been provided, to, support client, in the talent development journey.
Right.
Patrick, what I was going to add is, in answer to the question, how does it fit with my career strategy from a candidate perspective? I think the other kind of value that an executive search or advisory firm brings is the coaching and kind of support that it can provide around developing a value proposition for an executive, thinking about actually their own go-to-market strategy over and above a particular search, and adopting that trusted advisor kind of posture with an executive, because relationships essentially are the bedrock of executive search and advisory firms. And it's no surprise, of course, that the source and origination of a lot of the searches themselves come from those that a firm supports in an individual capacity at one time or another. The other value potentially that comes from partnering with a search firm is the inherent confidentiality that can be brought to that process. Many executives, obviously in very high profile, sensitive roles within whatever organization they might happen to work for, potentially can struggle to navigate the market without necessarily some support from a professional. So there's additional benefits that come from that sort of work as well.
Great, thank you for that. And William, I want to ask you, how can a candidate know if an executive search consultant is following professional standards and ethics?
Right. Well, I think there are a couple of key points, and Alistair just noted one of them, is that a professional search consultant is, when he or she approaches a candidate, should, and fairly early in the conversation, make it clear that the conversation, the discussion is indeed confidential, and that the candidate's profile, resume, whatever, is not going to be shared anywhere without his or her permission. Then the consultant will give the candidate a fairly thorough briefing of the client. It depends on the nature of the search. Maybe really reveal the name of the client, maybe not. But there'd be information about the purpose of the search, ideas of why the client needs to look outside the company, if there are any sense of urgency in the placement. The candidate should be able to ask a number of questions and get as transparent answer as possible. And if the executive gets a sense that this consultant is going to make some sort of a presentation, or pushes the job onto the candidate in a very quick manner without a thorough interview, that should raise a red flag right there. The candidate hopefully will get a sense that the consultant is taking the candidate's interest, his or her skill set, as well as career goals into consideration during the process. Those are a few of the key points.
Great, thank you. And of course, you can also check out if the firm is an AESC member. That should give you some idea as well. So, and our website is www.aesc.org, and there's a list of members on that website. So the other thing I wanted to mention to the audience is remember, you're free to ask questions. In fact, we encourage that. There is actually a question in there already. We're going to it's talking about best practices for candidates to approach retained search firms. We've actually got a few questions on that later in the discussion, so stay tuned for that. But there's some add-on questions here that the panel might want to think about in the interim, which are, how has it changed recently? So with COVID and greater use of technology, how has that changed how people should engage with executive search consultants? But before we move on, Alistair, I just wanted to ask you, are there any common misconceptions about executive search? You touched on some of those a little bit before, but perhaps you'd like to expand a bit.
Absolutely. I think we've already spoken. Agam kind of was quite careful in the delineation of a recruitment business from a search leadership advisory firm. I mean, critically, search firms are not are specialists inherently in leadership appointments, among other things, and so there's a level of rigor and kind of customization. Bill kind of spoke to this as well. That kind of a firm brings to the process of sourcing, attracting, acquiring, selecting talent for a particular position. So there's obviously a level of customization there that necessarily, given the transaction value, one might say, doesn't make business sense for a recruitment business. I think another thing that is often a misconception in the market is that search firms only fill positions that are advertised and kind of only work in very selected ways. The truth is that actually most engagements have high levels of confidentiality, which we've already spoken to. There's a sensitivity perhaps because the appointment may be for a public or listed business with significant ramifications for shareholders in the market or otherwise. And so actually there's a level of kind of specialism again that search firms bring that comes from building relationships and networking with the market over and above just actually applying for a job. And the last thing, I think I already mentioned this, is that search firms inherently care deeply about the candidate as much as they care about their clients. I think sometimes there can be a perception, and again, the broader recruitment industry perhaps paints a fairly negative perspective sometimes on this, but actually search firms really have a level of obsession with candidate experience. I certainly know for our firm that's a hygiene factor for us around actually how we engage with those through the searches that we do, the mapping that we do, but also general conversations we might have. And we really privilege taking time to understand a candidate's particular career goals and motivations and work with them to think about the sorts of positions that might align with their ambitions, whether it's a specific dedicated search that we're engaging on at that particular moment or otherwise. And that level of care and attention, I think, is an important differentiator of the sorts of businesses that we belong to versus that broader industry.
Great, thank you. And we have a couple of audience questions just on some of the topics we've been discussing. So I might throw those out to get answered quickly, just conscious of time, but they're interesting questions. So the first one really is, how do executive search firms go about finding their candidates? So who would like to tackle that one? Go ahead. Go.
Well, I mean, it's a straightforward process. I think most search firms, there's a couple of ways they do it. But basically, we, with the client, help to identify other companies that will hold similar candidates that will meet the qualifications, have the industry experience, and hopefully the professional skills that are required. So then we will look into those companies to identify executives that through job title and whatnot would apparently meet the qualifications. And then we do broad internet searches with keyword searches. And those of us, and I think all of us on the panel, have been in the industry for a long time. We have our own networks, we have research teams, and use networking to also to identify potential candidates. I mean, in a very brief nutshell, those are some of the key ways that we do it. I'm sure everyone else has their own their own thoughts on this matter.